Hi all, I'm Laura Black, Professor of Communication Studies at Ohio University. Welcome to Communication and Social Conflict. This class explores communication and conflict specifically as they relate to and occur in organizations. So, as it says in the syllabus, conflict is inevitable in social life and it can happen at many different levels, between individuals, within a group, sort of between groups, and even at large social scales. Some level of dissent or disagreement is essential for ethical relationships and productive collaboration in groups and organizations. Conflict can lead to innovation. And many people argue that conflict is necessary for social change, equity, and social justice. Yet, conflict has the potential to damage relationships, stifle creativity and collaboration, or even escalate to something like bullying, violence, or harassment. So, it's essential that we learn to recognize, understand, and manage conflict, and to do that, we need to be competent and ethical communicators. So this course will help you develop your knowledge about conflict and communication, and also develop your own personal conflict management skills. We'll have weekly modules, and I'll do a short video like this each week. So this first module is a broad introduction to ideas related to communication and conflict. There are two readings: a handbook chapter that provides a historical overview of how research on conflict has developed over the past few decades, and a popular press article about why we should disagree more at work. You should read both of these and use some of the ideas in the readings when you're replying to each other's discussion board posts. A lot of the stuff in the handbook chapter are things that we're going to explore more thoroughly later in the semester, but for now there are a couple of concepts I want to highlight. First, let's talk about the definition of conflict. Although scholars have offered a variety of different definitions for conflict, there are a few key attributes that run through them and are relevant to our work together. Conflict involves some kind of expressed struggle between interdependent parties who perceive that their goals are incompatible and perceive that the other party is interfering with their abilities to achieve their goals. So let's look at those four aspects. One, interdependence. Conflict really only happens if people are connected in some way, if they relate to each other and rely on each other. Otherwise, it never is manifested because the people aren't connected. Two, there's a perception that the goals are incompatible. Whether they really are or not is not as much of an issue as the fact that when we're in conflict, we're perceived that our goals are incompatible, and we perceive there's interference. That's the third thing. So if we're in conflict, we think the other group or other person is interfering with our ability to achieve our goals. And finally, it's expressed in some sort of expressed struggle. And we can look at how this definition works with a couple of examples. Pretty straightforward. Let's say I'm having an argument with a member of my family, like my teenager who wants to go out with friends and do something that I, as the parent, think is dangerous. So clearly, we're interdependent because we're members of the same family, we live in the same house, and so on. My teen wants to go have fun with her friends and wants to be able to make decisions for themselves. But I want my kid to stay safe and be away from people and places that I think are a bad influence. So our goals in this situation are different, and we see them as incompatible. And my teen clearly sees me as interfering with their goals, and we get into an argument. So that's an expressed struggle, and obviously this example fits all the parts of the definition. But in a work situation, conflict might look a little different. So it can come from two team members who have different ideas about how a project should be done, or from two different units in an organization who have really different goals, like sales and operations, or workers and management. Conflict can show up when we have people in a workplace who just really seem to dislike each other, and then treat any little difference as just one more example of how this other person is an awful human who's causing problems, right? So you've probably seen some things like this in your own work experience. So conflict is complicated. And even though this basic definition helps us identify conflicts, there are a lot of additional factors that go into understanding how conflict happens and what we can do about it. So conflict can be about different things, right? It can be about a task, it can be about resources, it could be about a process, it could be about different values that we have, right? So it can be sparked by lots of different things. conflict also always happens in some sort of context, and context matters. So our relationship of the people involved, culture that we're in, cultural background of the people involved, power, all matter. Conflict develops over time. It has phases. It can build before it's expressed. It can build for one person and the other person isn't aware of it, right? But there's this development over time. Even after it's resolved, it can sort of bubble back up again. And conflict involves emotions and perceptions that are really personal, and they can be different for the people involved. So we'll spend time in this course looking at these different aspects of conflict, like power and culture and perceptions and emotion and all of that different stuff. For now, it's useful just to remember that conflict is complex and influenced by personal and contextual factors. So the second big idea that I'll touch on just really briefly here is the role that communication plays in conflict. Early conflict research didn't really look that closely at communication. It just sort of treated some communication as something that happened during a conflict. But our thinking about communication has really developed over the past few decades. And we see now that communication isn't something you just turn on and off like a light bulb, like a light switch. And it's, like a variable in a research study. Communication is how we live our lives. We are constantly communicating, regardless of whether we are saying words out loud or not. Communication surrounds us, and it's how we make sense of our social world. So conflict inherently has both material and communicative features. Conflict is communication. Communication is an interactive process between people, and it's also the way we make sense of our relationships to society. So studying communication in conflict, the name of this class, social conflict, means that we'll look not only at what words people say to each other when they're engaged in conflict and conflict management. It also means we understand that communication is how people frame what a conflict is about and what it means. Communication is how we understand the cultural norms and larger social discourses about what's important. Communication includes the narratives that we have about ourselves, the narratives we have about what it means to be a good person and what others are like. So in this course, we'll look at all these different facets of communication and how they relate to conflict. Understanding communication and conflict in this nuanced and sophisticated way has really practical implications because it helps us make decisions about how to manage conflict. That's the ultimate goal of this course, that you'll be able to have deep understanding of these ideas and then apply them to your life to manage conflicts successfully in different situations. Okay, that's it for now. I hope this video helps you focus your ideas as you go and read through the assignments this week, read and do the assignments this week. I look forward to reading your discussion posts, and I invite you to stop by my office hours to introduce yourself if you get a chance. Thanks, and have a great week.